Hello and welcome back to another episode of Come Back Stronger, where we bring you stories of incredible people who have overcome significant adversity and obstacles and gone on to come back stronger and help other people do the same. I'm Dana Brooks of Fasig Brooks Law Offices, and I'm joined today with my law partner, Jimmy Fasig. How are you?
I'm doing amazing, and I'm super excited to meet Dr. Neal.
Yeah, what turns you on about him?
Oh, well, first of all, this is a man that was a preacher at 12 years old. That's one of the most impressive things about him. How many people you know preaching at 12 years old?
I know none.
Yeah. Well,
I can name you exactly zero.
I mean, it clearly has to do with the wisdom that he gained from having to overcome the loss of his mom.
This man has seen more aces than a Vegas card dealer.
Oh my
This
gosh.
guy had everything bad happen to you.
Yeah, no doubt.
He lost his mother when she was 25. He was a child. He had three other siblings, brothers, and he lost her to gun violence. Domestic gun violence. So that's losing two people who are supposed to be there for you no matter what. So he goes on to suffer even more senseless gun violence tragedies in his life. And that provided an impetus for him to say, I don't want to keep living like this, and I don't want the people I love to live like this either. He was a young pastor, but he's gone on and he's founded a network, and it is designed, and its entire intent is to help people process all the harm, all the grief, all the trauma that comes from experiencing gun violence. And unfortunately, you're going to find out he's an African American, and that is a prevalent problem in their community more so. It's overrepresented in the African American community. He'll talk about that, and he'll talk about how that affects people and what he wants to do and empower other people in his community to do something about it through his fervent belief in God and the power of religion and prayer. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this for Greg Bird's first interview with Pastor Lorenzo Neal.
So I think one of the important roles that a female lawyer has is understanding the family dynamic. The more you understand what people do for their families, the more money you can get people when they're injured and they can't service their families by everything that they're doing at home and at work. And I don't want to say that men don't understand that family dynamic, but I do think that statistics show that women understand that family dynamic more and can empathize and sympathize with it because of our own roles in our own homes.
Right, and it helps offset some of these assumptions about women's claims, which is that they're inherently valued lower. It's easier to replace the things that they do. They're more menial. They're not higher earning career professionals. When you look at everything they do, and what the negligence of the wrongdoer has caused them and this whole entire family, that adds up pretty fast. And you've got to have somebody who is looking out for you and knows to go after every single thing you are owed. And we are back for the first part of our interview with Dr. Lorenzo Neal. And unfortunately, he has suffered a lot of senseless gun violence in his life, and he's turned it around into a way to help other people through faith. So take a look.
Dr. Lorenzo Neal, thank you so much for being with us today at Come Back Stronger. How are you doing?
I'm well, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself to our guests, give a little brief of what you do. You're a doctor, you're a reverend, you're a man of many talents and letters.
Yes, so I am Dr. Lorenzo Neal. I am officially pastor of the New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi. That's my official role, but I also serve as an adjunct professor in music, a pastoral counselor and therapist, and my other primary role is the Senior Survivor Fellow with the Everytown for Gun Safety Survivor Network.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to really get into, that work with the Everytown Network. You're getting to this point. You had a lot of personal experience with gun violence in your life, and unfortunately, you lost your mother to gun violence at an early age. Why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up and the tragedies that you saw?
You know, it never gets old when I tell this story. Although it happened in 1980, my 25-year-old mother, Sharon Neal, lost her life in an act of domestic violence that involved a gun. And I always, now that I'm over the hill past 25, I realize how short of a life that was taken away. But she was survived by her 4 sons, myself and 3 of my brothers. 2 are still alive. And we were raised by her parents, my grandparents, as their own children. So for years, my grandparents, I didn't call them grandparents, they were my parents. Her sisters are my sister aunts. and we had a wonderful experience. The good thing about the relationship my grandparents had is they were able to help us live through the trauma of loss of such an early age. Even though we didn't quite fully understand and comprehend, they were able to, in so many ways, shield us from the real trauma of that loss. They filled in the blank, filled in the gap, and gave us a sense of normalcy. And I'm grateful, so grateful. My grandmother passed a few years back. My grandfather is still alive and kicking, and he is the backbone of part of the reason why I do this work. He lost his daughter. I lost my mother, but there's a shared connection, that's not just blood.
Yeah.
Of course, I went on and got educated. My older brother, Kevin, went to the military, served in the Navy. He eventually got married, had a wife, and had a son, Kevin Jr., who was bubbly, big-eared, big smile. You just had to know him. And just before his 18th birthday, he also lost his life through a senseless act of gun violence in 2016. I was already serving in the capacity of advocating against gun violence, and to have lost your mother and then lost a nephew, both to senseless gun violence acts, that added to the trauma. But I'm grateful for the organization I work with, Everytown, and for the family and the people I connect with. I share my story with primarily of those two losses. But also, I lost a student to gun violence, 14-year-old, eighth grader, and a companion brother in ministry in 2015, which is what actually pivoted me into this role of advocating for gun violence prevention in 2015, just in June of 2015, at Mother Emanuel AME Church, where Reverend Dr. Clemente Pickney and 8 others of his parishioners and 3 others, 9 were murdered, and 3 were injured. That catapulted myself and other members of our faith community into action, that we had to do something. And while that particular action of gun violence was racially motivated, we wanted to address the entirety of gun violence, because gun violence impacts everyone. I come in contact with people. It doesn't matter your income, education, your faith. It doesn't matter. We're all impacted by this epidemic of gun violence.
It's amazing the amount of gun violence these days on the streets, and just random and, like you say, senseless. I want to travel back a little bit, because obviously your grandparents, big inspiration in your life, a big shaper, because it would have been very easy for a young man like yourself and your brothers to fall into despair. So it was a blessing to have them. And also your faith. You've been pretty much preaching since you were age 12 and gone on and you're a reverend. How much has your family and your faith helped shape who you are and give you the strength to continue this fight?
I think it's been the biggest contributor of my work and my life. Now, being a kid preacher is it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Interesting life. You go through junior high and high school, and everyone knows that you're a preacher. You get the respect of the adults because you're the preacher, and you get the not so good, not so bad respect of the kids because they know you're a preacher, and they want to keep you out of trouble. It was a wonderful, weird dynamic, but both of those worked in collaboration to help me have a sense of not just normalcy, but balance. I didn't really learn about trauma until I, got into my college years, when I realized, the death of my mother was a traumatic experience for me. although I didn't express any, my brothers and I, we didn't express it out behaviorally. We shared this whole sense that we wouldn't live past 25. And I thought it was just me, but when I talked to all my other brothers, including one who's no longer with us, we had this shared sentiment. Our mother died at 25. Does that mean we will die at 25?
Yeah.
And so we worked with this urgency, like we got to get so much done before then.
Well, yeah, like I said, you got your master's, your doctorate in education. I mean, you got on, and we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we want to talk about the excellent work you're doing and what you do with the Everytown Network. So we're going to take a quick break and be right back.
That's amazing to me from an outsider, from an objective point of view, the lack of insight he had until he was so much older. Because looking at it from my perspective, I know what he's got in store for him when that happens to a child. But I didn't think about it from his perspective. All he knows is I'm probably not going to live very long. My siblings and I to see life is fleeting. I better get to it. So it was a great motivator. Sense of urgency. Unwittingly motivated him. But can you imagine the desperation that a child, instead of being a child, it really does explain why he might look for something like the faith to be such an important part of his life when he's just in middle school. You don't know what his life is. You're just looking at him and he seems like, oh, you kind of walk that off. He seems okay for it. No, this kid is all on his own, processing this a tremendous loss and trying to do something good with it. What were you thinking about that?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. I think what fascinates me is that I look at the story of his life and I think about the other people that I know that have been through traumatic experiences early on and how those traumatic experiences have shaped the people that have gone through them in ways they don't even know until later on. You can't see it until later on. But the wisdom comes when you are able to look at the things that you've been through and realize this is part of my story for a reason. And that's exactly what he has done, is that he's realized I have experienced all this gun violence in my life because I was put on this earth so that I could help other people that have experienced gun violence, which is exactly why he is a leader of the Every Survivor Network.
And there's no better person to do it. Are you going to listen to somebody who's had no experience with you, or someone who says, seriously, I've been through this and I've found a way to cope and to find something good out of it, and this is not the end of your life too. Let's process this together. But I can't wait to see the second half of Greg Bird's interview with, I called him Alonzo before, it's Dr. Lorenzo Neal, and we'll be back to finish up with that right after this.
Excellent service, 100 times more responsive than other attorneys I've worked with. Highly recommend, especially attorney Kimmy Hogan. She is fabulous.
Yes, she is.
It's all about communication. The #1 complaint about lawyers is my lawyer never calls me back. But the #2 complaint is my lawyer never calls me and tells me what's happening with my case. That's why I love reading a review like this, because I know, Kimmy, you are really good about calling your clients, letting them know what's happening with the case, keeping them informed every step of the way. Because what you got to remember is that these clients, this is their first case a lot of times. They've never been through this before. They don't know what to expect. Am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the right medical treatment? Am I actually going to get a settlement at the end of the case? So they need that reassurance, and they need to know what the process is every step along the way.
And we are back. We're going to go now into the second part of Greg Bird's interview with Dr. Lorenzo Neal. He is a pastor of an African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi, the New Bethel Church there. But he, unfortunately, has experienced a lot of gun violence in his life, and he's gone on to help other people with his unique set of skills process the same thing. So take a look.
Dr. Neal, welcome back. I want to talk about the work you do with the Everytown Network. Can you tell us a little bit about what the network is and what it does for people and what your role is for that?
Yes. So the Everytown Survivor Network is a connection of persons like myself who never asked to be a part of this organization. We wish nobody could be a member of a survivor network. But unfortunately, all persons who are part of this network identify in some way as having been impacted by gun violence. they either lost a loved one like myself, they've been physically injured by gun violence, or they've been involved in mass shootings, And we also include those persons who lost loved ones by suicide by gun. It's a broad network. And what we do is we comfort each other as much as we can. Mm-hmm. But there are those of us who elevate the stories of those who we lost. And that's the primary role that I do as a senior fellow, traveling and sharing how I've been personally impacted by gun violence. It's not just about my mother, it's not just about my nephew and the others that I've been connected with that lost their lives, but it's about the thousands of others, the hundreds who are impacted daily by this, that feel a sense of loss. And they're not sure how to articulate this, And so where we come in is we help them not only find a way to articulate that to themselves and to their families, but to the world around them. Because our goal is to help people see gun violence is not just a statistic. There's a name, there's an individual behind every news headline. It's not just about someone carrying out the mass shooting. And it's sad that the media focuses more on the perpetrator than the victim. Mm-hmm. And the aftermath of when a crime happens, when gun violence happens, neighborhoods are transformed. The entire consciousness of a neighborhood is transformed. You're not the same because you're wondering, when will it happen again? Or could I be the next victim? Could my loved one be the next victim?
Yeah, we just had that block party in Maryland that just, they get together every year and celebrate, and senseless gun violence breaks out. And I can imagine nobody in that neighborhood will ever feel the same way again about going out on the streets. Not.
And those are the things that the mainstream media will not share. But that's where we come in. We want to highlight, not to highlight it to, in a way that's negative, but affirming the fact that was a life. Or there are victims. Yeah. Even if there was no one killed, there's still victims. That's trauma. That's a lifelong trauma that individuals have to deal with.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, in America these days, it seems more and more incidents of gun violence are happening. Seems every day you turn on the news. Do you feel that because of the volume of it, that most Americans are kind of getting inured to hearing the news, that it's just another shooting somewhere else? Do you think that we're losing sensitivity to it just because it's happening so often?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, here's the thing. Gun violence has been increasing for the last 40 plus years. It's just that now we have greater access to it. For the most part, when newspapers reported acts of gun violence, it was, later on in the pages. It wasn't usually on page 1, maybe page 3, page 5, something like that. But now, with access that everyone has to cameras and all of this media, we're bombarded not just by the imagery of gun violence, but bombarded by all the highlights that come along with it.
And of course, you have been advocating for gun control laws, red flag laws. What do you feel is the resistance about that a lot of Americans feel? You're not taking my gun away, it's my constitutional right. And you're not advocating taking away constitutional rights. You want just common sense gun laws, don't you?
First of all, I'm going to tell you, I'm a gun owner myself. I've been a gun owner for a very long time. And, here in Mississippi, I've gone through the process legally, not just to purchase a gun, but also to do the concealed carry and all of that, because I want to model responsible gun ownership. I also realize that majority of Americans who own guns are responsible gun owners. Mm-hmm. But there are also those persons who should not have access to weapons that get access to weapons. There's no way here in the States a teenager, 13, 14, 15-year-old should have access to a weapon. There's no way that a person who has been convicted of violent crimes violent felonies should have access to weapons. There's no way that a person who has severe mental incapacities should have access to weapons. Those are the things that most people agree are common sense. Those are the things that we advocate for. I don't want anyone come taking my weapon from me. I also understand, but because I have one, I must be modeling what that should look like in front of my children, in front of my community members, that they need to see responsible gun ownership. And also to say that our legislators need to be aware that whenever gun violence happens, whether it happens in a major urban area or in a rural area, it impacts everyone.
Well, Dr. Neal, I first want to thank you for being with us today and sharing your story. I think it's powerful. People need to hear that. But I also want to thank you for the work you're doing, the advocacy. I know you've written a couple of books. Can you just quickly tell us if they want to find out more about your books or the Everytown Project, can you tell us where they can find more information?
Yes, if you would like to, and thank you for plugging, if you would like to read my work, you can go to lorenzotneal.org, lorenzotneal.org, and read some of the articles. You can see interviews and all that. You can also, all the books are available on Amazon. You can either type in Dr. Lorenzo Neal, Pastor Lorenzo Neal, it will come up. And if anybody's interested in becoming a part of the gun violence prevention movement, there are two organizations that we are affiliated with. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, that's our overarching area, and Everytown for Gun Safety. And you can go to everytown.org and get all the information. If you've been impacted, and I say positively impacted, because we want to take the narrative and take all of that back and empower the individuals. But if you've been impacted by gun violence and you identify as a survivor, then I strongly encourage you to become a part of the Everytown Survivor Network. And again, you'll be a part of a group of individuals like myself who take the incidents of negativity regarding gun violence and use it as a liberating means for service.
Oh, very much. I appreciate that so much, and we'll post the link for everybody to join. And again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Wow, he covered a lot.
He sure did.
He covered a lot. He covered, gun laws. He covered, being a therapist. He covered meeting a lot of needs. What were you getting from that?
I was thinking that I'm surprised, but not surprised, but I was happy to hear that he's promoting responsible gun ownership. He's not trying to take away your Second Amendment rights, but what he's saying is that there's got to be some reasonable, there's got to be something reasonable with regards to who we allow to have guns in our society.
That's just common sense. That's why it's called common sense gun laws. And something like high 70, 80% of the country wants it. So you legislators really need to listen to the people who put you in office and do what they ask you to do, and that is make us safer, please. Something's got to give. Do something. And it starts with common sense.
Just common sense.
Laws. Not abolishing people's rights, just putting some things that make sense. I do take exception with them saying the majority of the gun owners are responsible. No, most of the guns getting on the streets in our community, at least, are from unlocked cars. Gun owners who are not being responsible with them. They're getting in the hands of kids who have not been trained on how to shoot them. That's why you get a lot of accidental shootings. They're out there posing. They don't even hold them the right way. They're just trying to flex. And so do your job and secure your weapons.
Yeah, 100%. There are too many guns out there in the hands of the wrong people. But at the end of the day, we've got organizations like the one run by Dr. Neal, and we've got other organizations that are fighting for reasonable legislation. I think that's going to make
Every Child for Gun Safety. That's an important network. And if you have been affected by gun violence, and unfortunately, increasingly likelihood that you may be, reach out to some people who have walked this path and learn from them and learn that things can get better for you. But we'll be right back after commercial to wrap up.
This is about Carrie. It says, "There's not enough space, nor could I find enough words to articulate my experience with Fasig Brooks. Working closely with Carrie and Brittany has literally changed my life. Not only did they handle my case as if they were standing up for their own immediate family, we became like family. I've never felt alone in the process. I never felt like just another case, and the encouragement on the harder days would always lift me up. Absolutely everyone in the firm exudes a compassion for the cases they handle and a real passion to empower the lives of individuals and families far beyond a settlement. They are strong, resilient, will leave no rock unturned. I absolutely love Fasig Brooks.
I love that. I mean, I just have no words to explain how grateful I am that somebody feels like that about us.
We are back. We wrapped up our show interviewing Dr. Lorenzo Neal, a pastor from Jackson, Mississippi, who is very actively involved in helping people process senseless gun violent death and experiences like he had as a young man with members of his family's mother and then a nephew very close to him. Just so much going on, and Greg Bird, our producer who interviewed him, raised such a good point. Why is this happening to us? Why are we having hundreds, of shootings by mid-year, and we're just allowing that? Do we not care anymore? Or is it just background noise?
I think it's pretty clear, Dana, that our society's been desensitized to gun violence because we hear about mass shootings every single day. I mean, hardly a day goes by where you don't hear about something. So it's not even front page news anymore, barely. And so I think it's important to have organizations like Dr. Neal's organizations that are keeping their finger on the pulse of this very important issue and helping promote responsible gun ownership, and also to be there for the survivors of gun violence, because for them, it is not second page news. For them, it is on the forefront of their minds every single day, and it will be for the rest of their lives because it's traumatic and it's horrible. It's one of the most horrible things to do is to lose a loved one through traumatic thing like a gun, through gun violence.
But think what it does to you as survivor is you feel like you're going to have a foreshortened life. Life has a different meaning for you now.
It sure did for Dr. Neal.
And then I think about this too. I wonder if people ever go, well, I don't want to walk to the store in my own neighborhood. I could get shot. I need to go on
it happens every day.
So much to unpack in that, and I'm so glad we had Pastor Neal with us. Thank you for watching another episode of Come Back Stronger. If you know someone who would be a great guest, reach out to us. We would love to see them, and we will see you again next week. Take care.
Tony, Jimmy, and Kelly took what was a scary and horrible experience and turned it into a positive situation. Once these three jumped on our team, we were able to leave the legal part of the process to them and concentrate on our healing. You will always come back stronger with Fasig Brooks on your side. The insurance company made us go 1 month before trial until they finally paid the money they were supposed to a year earlier.
The reason why they paid the money is because they knew we were ready, willing, and able to go to trial. Insurance companies aren't paying out of the kindness of their hearts. They're paying now because they think if they don't pay now, they may have to pay more later, right? And so we showed them that we had the evidence together, we had our witnesses set up, we had the doctors, their depositions were already scheduled, and they knew we were going to go to trial, and that's when they finally became reasonable. That happens all the time.